Put the egg up here. Let it roll down there. What's going on, everybody? It is Cam here, Easy Work Acres. It is a blazing hot day out here today. Not exactly the greatest day to be out here in the middle of a field doing some work, but it is time to double our rollaway nesting boxes. So some of our younger hens are now reaching laying age and they're starting to lay, so we need to increase the amount of nesting boxes that we have. We have some old ones here that we're about to convert to this rollaway style nesting box here, to where your eggs will roll to the back of it, and this is completely adjustable, and that's what we'll be getting into today. So I built this a couple weeks ago to try and work out the kinks and everything before doing the other one and actually getting a recording of it, and this has worked really well. We changed a few things, and I think we got it down now to where we can give you a good build for this rollaway nesting box specifically. So just to give you an idea of what our old rollaway boxes were like, so basically we'd have to come out here, undo a screw, and then these doors open up, and then we have all these different nesting boxes in here, which worked for a while. Having straw in there and everything worked okay, but it just got to be a hassle. The eggs kept coming out dirty. We get tired of having to reapply straw and all of that, so that's why we're switching to the rollaway, and it just makes for much cleaner eggs, to where we're not spending all of our time cleaning eggs all of the time. All right, so first thing I'm gonna do, knock out all this old stuff, and then we'll get started fresh. So we got everything knocked out here. Evan is scraping the floor clean and everything, just so that we have a clean surface we're putting everything back in on. Now I did actually keep some of the dividers because those will come in handy later on down the road. I actually reused some of the dividers in this other rollaway box. But now I'm gonna take some measurements to pull it out and get the right length so we can start framing this thing out before we start putting it all together. So to kind of show you what I'm gonna do here, I'm trying to keep it as symmetrical to this one as I can on the other side, which you can see this metal's higher than the other, but now that I'm redoing this, this is actually gonna drop down, and this will be exactly the same as the one next to it. But essentially, because I'm not working with something that's square, like this is a chicken tractor that's literally made on top of running gear. It's twisting, it's shifting. Nothing about this is square. So when you're building this, if you're building this on a tractor like this, don't try to make everything precise, tight. Leave yourself some wiggle room on everything, because you're gonna want room for this to be able to shift and twist around and everything still function later on down the road. And this is also outside. Wood swells and shrinks. Another reason you wanna leave some of this stuff a little bit of wiggle room, so that you're able to adjust your boxes and stuff like it's intended. So essentially, from the inside front of this to the back of this, I want it to be 27.5. That board here, just like this one. But like I said, since this is not square and this is not going to equal the other side, I'm not going to make my board 27.5. I'm going to make it 26.5, so I have an inch to come off of this front, and there's some wiggle room here to move back and forth, and same thing on the other end, to where I can make sure that I'm the exact same on both sides. And that 27.5 is basically to leave more than enough room for a box that's 2 foot on at least 2 foot on the inside. You know, then you got to think of the thickness of the 2x4 to fit in here with plenty of room and not have to worry about it hitting this front plate or anything like that when this tractor shifts or moves. So plenty of room inside your framework. That's why I'm going with at least 27.5, 28 inches inside the framework for your nesting box. Now, as far as lengthwise is totally your preference. It depends on how wide of a box you want to make. This is 66.5 wide from outside to outside on the framework. And the only reason it is that measurement is just because that's what size I built it on this chicken tractor. That's what seemed to work with the framework at the time when I put in these old boxes. But as far as the outside structure of this and framing the outside, you can make the width as whatever width you want it to be, but depth-wise, I would keep it similar to the same, because that's gonna be just enough room for the chickens to get in there and lay, and then it roll back without catching too much roll and then breaking your eggs. So depth-wise, try and keep it close to that 28 inches, the 27.5, 28 inches, so that you have that 2 foot nesting box on the inside. But lengthwise, you can go as long as you want to or as short as you want to. Right, so now I'm gonna frame in the outer upper railing. Now, since I have already something structurally built up the sidewalls, you know, essentially you would build this bottom railing this whole outside box, and then, you know, walls going up the side, just like I have here. You could do that just framework wise. But all I'm gonna be doing is putting a board in here that kind of slants down slightly, just so that there is slope for the roof for rain to run off the top. And that wasn't even anything exact. I'll give you the exact measurement of the board I put in, but as far as the amount of slope, I just eyeballed it and made it equal on both sides. And it doesn't have to be anything exact as long as you have enough slope that rain is gonna run off. All right, so as far as that board that's gonna go on top, all this is from the flat point, because you won't need an angle if you have a framework built like this. But basically it is 26 inches long from the long point to this flat right here. And this angle here is literally an eyeballed angle. I didn't make anything fancy, not any specific cut or anything. And I did the same thing on the other side. It wasn't anything specific, and it works. So all I'll do to make sure that those match is I will put this other board right here, butt up the ends, make it flush, and then make a mark, and then cut that line, and it should be exactly the same as this piece with the same exact angle for both sides. Right, so as far as putting this angled piece in, I already got some screws started to screw to the inside framework of this. This is literally just in here as a way to make sure that I am flush with the outside edge of this board right here. So I put it in here, and then you'll see also that I have a black line right here. So that's 4 1/4, and that is just what the bottom of this board here is gonna go to. And the only reason being is to make it identical to that one right there, the other nesting box. I want this to look the same. The angle's close enough that I can work with it. And I just want the bottom of this to make sure I'm going 4 1/4 so that I have matching nesting boxes. If you want something different than a 4 1/4 height in the back, that's totally fine. As far as, you know, inside to inside, this is definitely gonna be taller outside to outside, but inside to inside, that measurement from the top of this board to the bottom of this one is 4 1/4. So we got those outside pieces on here for the top. Next is putting another crossbar across here for the metal attached to, and then that is it as far as the outside framing for this. The next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and build the inside framing for the nesting box that's gonna tilt and adjust, and then we'll move on to putting in some dividers and things like that before we wrap it with metal, and then this thing is done. On there, outside framing completed. So now that we have done the outside framework, the next part is the actual, you know, tray that the eggs are actually going to be rolling on. So what that's going to be is it's going to be 64 inches wide, like the length of the nesting box, but then the inside is going to be 22 inches long. So I'm going to have 2 boards cut to 64 inches and 2 boards cut to 22 inches long. And then I'll show you how I put those together to make sure that you are, you know, overlapping the right seams where the boards meet. What I meant by lapping this in the right orientation as far as the corners go is that you want the shorter piece to go to the inside of the long piece, not the outside of the long piece, because then you're too wide. You want this to be 64 inches wide by 22 in depth. Got the framework done. So now what I'm going to be putting down is this 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch wire mesh. And this is a big reason why I made the frame the depth that it is specifically, so that it is the exact size of this wire mesh with plenty of room for me to staple to. I'm going to be stapling this on here with 18 gauge staples with this staple gun here, but you could use just a hand stapler. You could probably use trim nails, things like that. But once I put the struts in, that's also gonna help hold it. So once I get this stapled all the way around, I'm actually gonna be putting in some thin strip struts in this thing so that it helps support the wire mesh. And the dividers will be on top of these struts, so the chicken shouldn't be laying on the actual strips. But that's going to help this wire mesh from sagging and stretching over time, especially with chickens laying in there and standing on it. This stuff can stretch some over time, and then your wire mesh doesn't roll like it should. Or if, like in my nesting boxes, how part of the floor is actually still gonna have solid floor on it, the eggs, if this wire mesh is laying against that hard floor, the eggs are gonna crack against that hard floor. So I only want the eggs touching this and nothing beneath. All right, so I have the wire mesh on. So now I'm gonna be putting these like 3/4 inch thick little strips down. You could, I mean, anything that is just a thin strip of some sort that you can put down will work. All this is to help support this wire mesh. So this is just like some scrap I had off of some kind of board, and then these on the outside are just some leftover 3/4 inch plywood. So they're all the same thickness, but it's just to help support the wire mesh. So gonna tack these on just with a trim nailer, nothing fancy. I've already tacked this one down right here, and I have 3 of them. And they're somewhat evenly spaced out, basically just eyeballed it, but this is also where my dividers are gonna go when I put the dividers in. I want these under the dividers specifically so that the chickens are not laying on top of this, but instead in here in this nice basket area, the dividers will be on top of these. Now all that's left to do with this thing is just snip off the excess of that wire mesh, and then we're gonna go ahead and set this thing in here. So something I forgot to mention is when I flip this thing over, so you know we've been working on this side, when you flip it over and you're on this side, I went ahead and threw staples down these also. That way this can just be even more supported. Now, let's go put it in the nesting box. So don't make the same mistake as me and read your tape measure incorrectly, because I was too far back to make the judgment call. Should have got on top of my tape. And now I'm a 1/2 inch too big on this dropping in there like it should. So it is not 64 inches, it is 63.5 inches wide for this to fit down in there with some room and everything like it should be. So now I'm gonna have to go rip this on a table saw. Should be super fun with, you know, wire mesh and everything stapled to it, but we'll get it fixed and we'll get it in there and we'll keep moving. All right, new day. Hopefully things will go a little smoother and I won't make a mistake with the daggone tape measure, but we got the sides trimmed off of this thing with the table saw, and it fits in there just fine now. And then now it can teeter to where I can adjust it to whatever angle I want it to be. So the way my setup is could be different than yours. Mine, since I already had existing nesting boxes and this is hanging off, I'm able to just use the lip of this wood to just teeter against. But if you don't have this same situation, you either have a totally false bottom or a completely covered bottom, you're gonna have to put some bolts right here on each side for it to teeter on. So that'll be the main difference, is just put some middle bolts in that they can actually teeter on and it should be fine. Or you could put a whole board running across the whole middle that it could teeter on. Either one works. But what we'll end up doing is drilling some holes along here in 3 different levels that I can stick a bolt in or take them out, put it to a different adjustment, put the bolt back in, it'll hold it in place. I'll show you how that works here in a little bit. But for now, we're gonna go ahead and move on to making the separator between the chickens and where the eggs roll away to, which will also be when we add the dividers in. Also, some people there's a big debate about if chickens need dividers in their nesting boxes or not. I think they can do either one, and you could leave this totally open. But with our experience with this, is when we left this totally open and not had dividers in it to where there was separate nesting boxes, all chickens, all of them, wanted to lay in the corners, and that's it. So then you had like 3 or 4 chickens piled up in here fighting over the corner to lay an egg. Once we put the dividers in there, we had no more issue with that, and they evenly laid the eggs across the entire nesting box instead of just in the corners. Right, so like I said, we'll be putting some holes on the inside of this tray to where it will actually make contact with the outside framework, and then I'll be able to stick a bolt in here and that'll help hold it in this position, and then I'll take that bolt out, teeter it down some, drill another hole, and so on, to where there's different angles that I will have this set to. Just take this rusty old bolt here, nothing special, and that's what I'll use as like a peg to hold it at this angle specifically. Next hole, I'll teeter it down at a little bit of an angle, and then get another hole just above the last. And it should line up with your previous hole on the other side of that tray, on the outer frame. And then I'll put that bolt in there to hold it in place while I go to the other side and get it. All right, to give you a better view, so I have a hole at the top, a hole in the middle, and there's a hole under that bolt too. And then I'm able to adjust this to a different height, like up or down, and then plug that in the different holes. And it's the same thing on the other side here. So essentially, I've never really needed to teeter it any steeper than this middle hole or being level, because I'm always on a hill and I usually try and orient the tractor to where it is not on any too steep of a hill anyways. So typically level or just slightly under level was enough to get it to roll. Now, all I do in order to figure out how much roll that I need, I have like just an old wooden egg that I use, or you could use a regular egg, and set it up here about where the chickens would be laying and see how fast it rolls. I will end up be putting a little bit of padding along this railing here towards the end. But you want this to roll, but not like a line drive from the nesting box to the back of this, because you don't want cracked eggs. The whole point in this is to have less messy eggs when you are collecting them. So you can test how much grade you want on this thing just by simply throwing in a wooden egg in there and just judging whether or not that's going to roll too fast to crack an egg or not. So as far as putting in the separator, the next thing I'm going to do is I got this wooden block here, and I'm going to do that on both ends to basically give me something to screw to for our divider face that's going to go down here. And I just have this screwed enough that when I put the divider in, they still have at least a full 12 inches in their nesting box. You can make it bigger, but at minimum 12 inches back from the front edge of this basket so that there's plenty of room for the nesting box area. As far as like how much space you're giving yourself on the divider, that's how much you want, but minimum 12 inches for the nesting box specifically. And this block goes in, this block goes in, and then we're gonna put in a stretcher and then put the divider on. So that's in. And all I'm gonna be doing is using these old divider boards that I had in here before. You can use just one big full sheet of plywood in here. I just have those pieces cut already, and I'm trying to use up any scrap so that one, I'm not wasteful, and two, it just saves me on wood. So I'm gonna put those in here that will hang down, but leave enough room for eggs to roll under it. All right, so we have the separator in here that separates the inside the nesting box to the outside where the chickens can't get to it. And now we're gonna go inside and go ahead and throw in the dividers. All right, so we're inside the coop, and all I'm doing is taking these pieces that used to be dividers in our old nesting boxes, standing them upright, right on top of that wooden strip that I put in before. And then all I'm gonna be doing is running a 3-inch screw right through the face of this inside tray that I built. And that will hold the divider right there in place. I probably put 2 screws, I think I did. I put 2 screws on the other one, but that's all that was in there to hold it. It's not like anything structural needs to be held real tight or anything like that. It's just something that essentially holds these up to where the chickens have some seclusion between each other, and that all your hens aren't trying to lay in one spot in the corners. So that's all I'm doing, throwing in 2 screws, and these are in here. Very simple to put the dividers in. And I would say this is probably like, I don't know, I want to say that it's like a 12 by 18 inch square, or I guess rectangle, that is going in here. All right, so one more thing we're going to be doing now that the dividers are in is we're going to start closing this face in some. So I'm going to be putting 1 or 2 boards across the top of here, and then I'm going to put some skirting, which is like a curtain that will again create a little more seclusion. Look out, Goofy. Yeah, go on. It ain't ready yet. I have the, face on. The last thing I'm gonna do is put a curtain in there. Now, there's a lot of arguing back and forth about whether chickens need curtains and dividers and all this other stuff. And I trial ran it with no curtain and no dividers. And my chickens would go in there and explore the nesting box, but they would not lay. And I tried this for several days, leaving it wide open to where there was nothing but just the cover on the front that I just put in, and then no dividers. The chickens somewhat kinda checked it out, but nobody would lay in it. The next step was putting the curtain on. As soon as I put the curtain on, they started laying. It was like they had the privacy that they needed, the right amount, and then they started laying again. The problem was then they started laying in the corners. So then I added the dividers, and now they have the privacy and the division to where they'll lay across the whole nesting box instead of just in the corners or not laying in there at all. So that's why I added these parts. Some people, you might be able to get away with it. Maybe your chickens don't care, but for some reason ours did, and we didn't have curtains over our old nesting boxes. But something about this nesting box, and I guess the fact that it's a little more spacious, it just didn't feel private enough for them. So gonna cut some triangles out of this curtain. All this is just like a strip of vinyl that I had on hand from an old gym floor. And I am just cutting some triangles to where there's just like open flaps, so it's easy for them to kind of see that there's the nesting box there, but still have the privacy. So nothing too special. The curtain can literally be any material that you have on hand that can be hung as a curtain. I like this stuff specifically because it's like a black vinyl, so it doesn't get nasty or anything. It doesn't soak up nothing. It's okay to get wet and it'll dry off just fine. So I do recommend that if you're gonna be using some kind of curtain in there, that you use some kind of material that's not gonna get nasty if chickens, chickens can get gross. So you wanna make sure that you're using something that is either cleanable or something that at least isn't gonna soak nothing in to begin with. By the way, get you a staple gun. This thing has been a lifesaver in so many situations at this point. Aside from a staple gun, pancake compressor, even better because it's so mobile. I have a big one, small one, way to go. You can carry it pretty much anywhere. You just pre-fill it before you go out to wherever you're working and then just drag it out there in a wagon like so. You don't have to have any power hookup or nothing, and it'll run a gun for quite a while, at least a trim nailer or a stapler pretty easily for a while without having to fill it back up. Just a tip, makes it a lot easier when you're out here working in the field. All right, so before we get the metal bed on, one more thing that I like to add in is the carpet strips against that back railing where the eggs are gonna initially hit. Now when the eggs roll back, they have a nice little surface to hit back there for those first couple of that come rolling out and are gonna roll the longest distance before they hit. All right, the last thing to do is wrap this bad boy in metal and put a lid on it. All right, so the first part I like to start wrapping is this front face here, which is about 11 inches tall, and it should only be about 2 of the metal roofing panels width wide. So only gonna cut off 2 quick strips, 11 inches long, and that should cover the entire face here. All right, so I'm about to cut the metal, and just mentioning another true game changer, one of these snipping tools right here. This thing will save you all kinds of time if you are working with metal, so I highly recommend one. It's an easy 45 bucks on Amazon, you'll have one, and this thing will save you an immense amount of time on cutting metal, especially if you're used to using like metal snips. Metal snips, they wear out your hands, you beat up your hands cutting metal. This thing is awesome and will cut your time down tremendously. So we are at another day. I swear this project doesn't take that long, but we have been so busy. I had to keep dropping what I'm doing and running and going doing whatever else. And now I'm about to put these metal panels on, but I think that's all I'm gonna be able to do today because I'm out of metal screws. So we'll be back after put these panels on, and it'll probably be another new day and we'll get the roof and the sides on. All right, so since I ran out of metal screws for now, we're not gonna stop there. We're gonna go ahead and move on to just getting the door and hinges prepared. So we have these hinges that were left over from the old door. What I'm gonna be doing is putting a 2x4 across here to mount to, and then putting the hinges on and running some 2x4s for a metal roof to go on here. All right, so I have my hinge plate on that I'm gonna be screwing the hinges to. And all I'm gonna be doing is putting these closer to the outside edge. These are pretty big, hefty, like metal hinges here that they came off like an old barn door or something. And basically I'm gonna screw them onto here, and the 2x4 is gonna go on the bottom side of this. So I need to leave enough room for a 2x4 to fit on the underside of this hinge that's gonna touch down on this lip here. So I got the hinges in here. I have the wood pieces cut that are gonna go under here. And then the metal is gonna go on top, and I'm gonna screw through both the metal and this hinge into this 2x4, and then from the metal to the 2x4 that goes on top. Now, before I do that though, I'm gonna go ahead and get the piece cut that goes here and get it on. I have metal screws now, and we'll get that screwed on just because it's simply a lot easier to get this metal on without having to like get up under the roof and everything. So I might as well take care of it now. As far as the side goes, basically, if you've never cut metal or cut angles before or anything like that, it's pretty simple. But basically, I measured down from the front. That's 11.5 inches, and then I measured the high point at the back, and that is 17 and a quarter. And then I would measure just the overall depth of it, which is 16 and a half. So I'd make that 17 and a quarter, height at the back, shorter at the front at that depth, and you'll be able to easily cut a flat bottom with an angle at the top. All right, so I have metal that is cut already from the other nesting box that I made. So if the angle is similar enough, I'm just gonna go ahead and use it. But basically, like I was saying, it is 17 and a quarter down that back side here. So I'll mark it at 17 and a quarter at the high point, right about there. And then it was 11 and a half at the front end. So 11 and a half down from the front tip here, right there. And then it looks like that's gonna do it. I think that's gonna cover just fine. And this is, how deep is this? 17 inches, and I needed a 16 and a half inch piece. So I'm only a half-inch difference from that other nesting box that I made, which works out perfectly for me because it's easy to just trim off that half-inch off the back end here. Now, one more thing, like I said, I'm gonna cut across the bottom here and there, and the angle is close enough that I'm gonna use it. This is oriented for the other side of what I showed measuring down there. So just keep that in mind, that this is actually gonna go on the left side of the nesting box. And when you're doing the right side, the high point will have to be over here, angling down this way. So you're not gonna be able to take this piece and directly mirror it unless you flip it over, which you could probably do pretty roughly. But keep in mind that this is not the exact mirror of the other side, because the way that the metal is, you have to face it out a certain direction. All right, to show you what I'm talking about, I've already taken this piece that I cut here, and I already went down to the nesting box to dry fit it. It fits good. So then in order to get the other side, I just flip that over, and then I can trace this out and then make the cut, and I have both sides of the nesting box. All right, so now we're gonna cut the roof, get the roof on here, which this ended up being 69 and a half long by 20 inches depth-wise here. And what I'm doing, I'm using these self-tapping metal screws. They're 1 5/8" metal tapping screws is what I'm using. The ones that have the little rubber washers under them. That way water isn't leaking through onto the wood that you're drilling into here. But these will tap through both the metal roofing, and they will tap into this metal hinge and grab on there, and then the hinge will work in conjunction with the metal roof that's attached. So just gonna drill these in, and we should be pretty much squared away with this thing. If you know anything about metal roofing, by the way, it's not supposed to be ran this direction, but since this is just a nesting box and I'm not really concerned about super efficient watershed, this works, and it allows me to not have to use several sheets or cut up a sheet. And this was already ripped, so I'm able to use the scrap. So that's why this is on this way. It's not because I have no idea how metal roofing works, simply just because I'm trying to use up scrap is all I'm trying to do without having to use up all of it. All right, so we got the lid on there, opens and closes just fine. And then the chickens will hop in that nesting box, be able to lay, and they will roll right back. And it'll take them a couple days probably to get acclimated to this thing and realize that it's even there for laying, or to even give it a shot. But once they get acclimated, you'll have all kinds of nice clean eggs in here that will roll away and make your life a lot easier when it comes to boxing your eggs for sale, or just simply having clean eggs for your own household. So that's all I got for you. Hopefully this was something that can give you some ideas on how to do this yourself on your own existing boxes. If you did like the video, please like the video with the like button and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to keep having you guys on our channel and sharing anything we can with you guys that might be able to help you out, both new and existing subscribers. Thank you again for watching. You all have a good one.